Welcome to our Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today, live with founder and president of Natural Habitat Adventures, Ben Bressler. For the past 35 years, Ben has grown Nat Hab to become a global leader in nature travel, offering life-enhancing adventures to the world's most wondrous wild places. Aside from heading a meaningful company that provides the world's greatest nature expeditions, Ben's professional ambition is to utilize adventure travel to build support for conservation. We also are joined today by Dr. Court Whalen. He is Nat Hab's Director of Sustainability and Conservation Travel, and his background in wildlife and conservation biology led him to pursue a joint PhD in ecotourism and entomology while simultaneously coordinating and guiding small group wildlife expeditions and ecotourism adventures around the world. And today he is our moderator and co-host with Ben. So Court, I'll turn it to you.
Thanks so much, Lee. I appreciate it. So I've been busy over the last 14 minutes learning everything I can possibly know about being a moderator. So this is going to go really interesting. No, kidding. So yeah, no, it's a pleasure to be here today. You probably have seen me over the last Daily Dose webinars with talking a lot about photography, talking about monarch butterflies, talking about general travel things. Today we're kind of switching gears here a little bit, and I will be the moderator for today's talk. The elephant in the room is that with this worldwide pandemic, the travel industry was one of the very first things to be significantly impacted, and significantly impacted pretty hard as well. So not just the first, but also kind of ongoing. So I thought this would be a unique perspective today to chat with the founder and president of Natural Habitat Adventures, Ben, to give us all a unique perspective of how this has impacted the travel industry and what the future might be like. So we've got a series of questions here that you were able to email in ahead of time. One other different thing is that we won't be taking live questions today, different from the norm. We did have an email call out, so people did let us know questions ahead of time. We've got a long list, so once I get through all 450 of those, we should be in pretty good shape. No, kidding, of course, but we've got a long list of really great questions. I want to thank you in advance for sending those our way. So another bit of housekeeping thing, I just wanted to let you know, unfortunately, Sven will not be able to join us today. He has been called out last minute. As you can imagine, as the owner and CEO of over a dozen small expedition vessel companies, he was urgently needed elsewhere for something, so we apologize about that. But Ben has promised to make up for his absence with extra charisma and extra jokes today. So we hope that will certainly fill some of the void, but we do apologize. But without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce Ben here. So again, our head luggage carrier of the, president, explorer, and founder of Natural Habitat Adventures, Ben Bressler. We'll jump into some questions, but just wanted to give you a moment to say hello, Ben.
Hiya, folks. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for the intro, Court. I knew I could count on you to get right on top of me immediately. That's what I do here. Is I am the whooping boy for Court's jokes. So you go ahead, mister.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Well, no, really part of this is that I do want to keep it informal. This is obviously, we're talking about some serious stuff with the state of the world, but nevertheless, we want to get to some fun questions as well. So right off the bat, we'll just kind of kick into some of the easier questions. We've got little Timmy from Boise, Idaho wants to know, what is your favorite color, Ben? No, I'm kidding. Sorry, I will dial the jokes back a little bit here, but no, without further ado, this is actually one of the more interesting questions, kind of setting the stage for Natural Habitat Adventures. Ben, in all seriousness, what motivated or inspired you to pursue the exploration of nature and then strongly link with conservation? And with that, whether you want to start with that or wanted to add in, what was the origin? How did you start Natural Habitat Adventures?
Wow. Yeah, thanks for the softball. I know there's a lot of serious questions coming up about the pandemic, but this is something that I'm always interested in talking about. The founding of Nat Hab, and it is the most unlikely company that you can imagine. That the company was founded and continues to this day, 35 years later, is very unlikely. So this is going to take me a few minutes. So not all my answers are going to be this long, but when I talk about the history of Nat Hab, I've done 2-hour presentations on it. So when I'm talking about Nat Hab, I do end up talking about myself, which is what men like to do, by the way. We all like to just talk about ourselves because that's men for you. And you know, I started Nat Hab in 1985. I was a prep school teacher in New Hampshire. I was teaching history to 7th grade boys. And by all counts, especially the headmaster's count, I was the worst teacher that school has ever seen. It was Cardigan Mountain School in Canaan, New Hampshire. And I had these 7th grade boys who harassed me all day long, and I deserved it. But after this year of teaching, which didn't go terribly well, towards the end of the year, I took a group of kids skiing out to Vail, Colorado. You know, after that, I thought, now here's an opportunity for a business. You know, I've always worked as a kid, whether it was raking leaves or painting houses or washing windows or shoveling snow. And I thought, hey, this is something I can do. I can start a company that takes kids out into nature and do these trips. And so after teaching, I spent the next summer driving a garbage truck in an amusement park in New Jersey, Action Park, a very famous park. They've made movies about it, and a buddy of mine whose father founded it just wrote a book about it. But this crazy park. And I was driving a garbage truck there, and I saved this $600. And at the end of the summer, I typed up a little brochure in my dad's basement on a typewriter, and then I mimeographed it. For those of you who remember the mimeograph machines, and there was ink everywhere. My dad had a mimeograph machine in his basement because he used to print these leaflets to go march in Washington against the war and for civil rights, and that was my dad. So he had this mimeograph machine. I made thousands of these, and I drove around the East Coast handing these brochures. It was folded pieces of paper, trying to get teachers to take kids out on trips. And then I got a little office in the back of a travel agent, and I told them I'd give them some of the money we made if I got these trips going. And I would make a list, and I would call 100 teachers a day, every day, and I couldn't leave the office till I made that 100 calls. And you know, maybe one a week would answer the phone and actually engage in conversation with me. But I was 21 years old, and I didn't know anything. And I was talking to these teachers about these trips, but you know, lo and behold, I just kept pounding the pavement, and a year later, I ended up with 5 groups of teachers and students to go on these trips. Of course, I didn't know how to put them together, the groups, the trips, but I figured I'd figure that out later, you know. And so I was putting these trips together, and 1986 comes around. There was some terrorism in airports in Rome and Athens over the next 2 years. So whenever I got a group of students, as soon as I did, there was some sort of event that would make everybody cancel. But the point was that people were interested in going out into nature and doing these trips with students, and I was excited about it. At that point, I was living on my brother's floor of his apartment. He is a lawyer in New York City, and I didn't have a penny, but you know, I spent all that $600 on postage to send out little brochures. But he kept me fed, gave me his leftovers, let me sleep on the floor of his apartment for a couple of years, and you know, started to get these groups going. But by 1988, I got a phone call from the International Fund for Animal Welfare. And that's the group that had been working to protect baby harp seals, the white fuzzy baby seals. They're beautiful animals. And they've been working since the 60s to protect them. And finally, the Canadian government in 1987 had created a ban on the commercial hunt of these white-coat seals. And now IFAW said that's what they were aiming for, but now they wanted to replace seal hunting income for the locals with seal watching income, and they needed a company to do it. Now, I still to this day have no idea how they got my number, a one-man operation, and they called me and they said, hey, would you like to run trips up to the Gulf of St. Lawrence to go see baby harp seals? And in my head, I'm like, I didn't exactly know what a baby harp seal was, you know. I knew it was a seal. And I'm like, yeah, sounds great. I'm in. Where is it? It's the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Yeah, where's that? Well, it's, you know, north of Prince Edward Island. Yeah, great. Where's that? Like just north of Nova Scotia. I didn't keep asking, but I got out a map. You know, with no internet, I went and got a map out and found out where it was. But I was in, and I spent the next year and a half putting together these trips to go see these baby harp seals. And we get up there. I'd never been in a helicopter, but I chartered 3 helicopters. We had 330 people from all over the world come to the first year of these baby harp seal trips. And IFAW had sent little brochures all over the world, and I've been writing to these people all over. I mean, handwriting hundreds of Dutch addresses, because the Dutch, they have a big group in Holland, and writing out Dutch addresses is tough because they've got like 14 vowels in a row, you know, in their street names. But I got 330 people came and showed up that first year, and we were flying around in helicopters. And at one point, I was sitting knee to knee, facing these two 70-something-year-old sisters who had donated maybe $25 a year to go to protect these baby seals. And we were on our way back, and then two of them back from the ice floes where they got a chance to actually pet a baby harp seal. And the two of them had tears in their eyes. And I realized that the protection of these animals is so incredibly important to these people. While I was out there, I was amazed at seeing hundreds of thousands of seals and the whole vastness of the ice floes. It was incredible for me as this young man to be seeing this, but to watch these travelers, to watch their reaction, to know that they were making a difference. And it was that moment that I realized, yeah, this is what I need to be doing. And this is how I can have an impact on the travel industry. So from there, in 1988, we finished up that trip in March and started realizing, what else can I do? And I had hired some staff then, some part-time staff, and we started to say, well, let's go. There's these polar bear tours in Churchill. Now those existed already, but we went in, we said, we're going to start running those too. So we added Churchill, and the next year after that, we added Alaska to go see the grizzlies at Brooks Falls, and Kenya and Galapagos. And it was from there that we just built it. And that's how we got very focused on conservation rather than just travel. Because we were born out of that. We were born out of the idea that travel can, sustainable travel can replace consumptive behaviors. You know, we've had our ups and downs since then, but if you go through the rest of, you know, Nat Hab's history, we ended up as partners a number of years ago with World Wildlife Fund, and we still are today, and it's been an incredible relationship. But it's the same concept, that conservation can be reached through travel because it has such a huge economic impact on local people.
I love that. I think we've all had those aha moments in life, especially at least early on in my career, having that light bulb that goes off like, this is how it works and this is what we've got to do. And the more we can do it, the better the world's going to be. So I love that. It's not just about the wildlife, but it's about the people on trips and the communities as well. So that leads me to my next question is that, you know, during this time, you know, how do you feel that Nat Hab and our travelers can best support the vulnerable communities and conservation efforts that are being so impacted now that travel has decreased and that we are in the state of the world that we're in? How can Nat Hab travelers and Nat Hab best help communities and conservation?
That's a great question. So conservation travel or ecotourism is all predicated on the people on the ground. It's based on the house cleaners, drivers, bartenders at camps, safari camps. It could be transfer people, airport folks. It's all based on these folks earning revenue to that motivates them and incentivizes them to protect their natural environment and the species within it as a sustainable natural resource. A rhino being worth X amount every year, people viewing that animal versus going in and hunting it, or moreover the loss of habitat because people needing to farm it. So the entire thing, everything we do is based on getting money into these local folks' hands, and that has disappeared. It has absolutely disappeared. That is the shame of it. That's the scary part about this entire concept right now, is we've never seen anything like this. I guess since the Spanish flu, or maybe since World War II, there hasn't been anything so disruptive like this to the travel industry. And by the way, the travel industry is one of the biggest industries in the world, and the conservation travel is one of the best ways to help protect local species or endangered species and local habitats. So it's really predicated on these local people. So what do we do when there's no money flowing to them? Well, we created our Nat Hab Community Relief Fund, which has been incredible, by the way. It's been, I think an email just went out about it, but we put in $25,000, and then we asked our guests, hey, if you would like to contribute and get money into these local people's hands, people who otherwise are going to go hungry, people who I mean, literally might not be able to feed their families. There are often workers in a safari camp in Africa that may support a family of 20. And they won't have medical care, and they won't have food. If you'd like to, you can donate $250, and we'll give you a travel credit for that. It's been incredible. We've raised almost $200,000 doing that. And now we're distributing it and seeing the smiley faces, these people, when they're like, holy crud, these people are just so incredibly enthused that those folks who had visited them, it's not just coming from Nat Hab, it's also coming from our guests. And the locals are feeling like, wow, we had a meaningful impact on those people's lives, so much so that they're willing to give money to help us survive so that conservation travel can make it through this. And here's the thing is, you know, $200,000 is great. We're giving more of Nat Hab money out. We're trying to allow local camps and local operators to have the cash flow to survive. That's really important, but it has to be beyond Nat Hab. I mean, it has to be all the other companies too, and we are seeing other companies jump on board and do similar things. And that's what's great about our industry. I mean, yes, we're competitors, but we're really friendly competitors. We all keep in touch, and there's a lot of companies who are out there trying to do this right thing to help support the locals who are vital to the entire experience and to conservation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really cool being in the office and part of the team and seeing these numbers roll in and seeing these victories and the digital high fives that go around email in the office to say, holy cow, look at what we're able to do without actually getting someone on the ground in that camp. We're still able to support them for the long haul. It's really, really energizing for our team here. So thank you, Ben. Thank you for that. So that leads me to a kind of a little bit of a segue there as well. So obviously COVID has, and this is a question from the audience previously, COVID has been disastrous, but there have been some positive environmental impacts, and we've seen that. And I know myself, I've read articles of things like dolphins returning to the canals of Venice, and that's one random example. We've seen and heard some things like that. We obviously have our conservation challenges with people on the ground and wildlife and the lack of eyes and ears that do come from touristic operations. But have you seen any silver linings and what might they be in the current situation?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think that dolphin may have been debunked, but
Okay.
yeah, but your point is well taken. Without visitors, animal life can roam a little more freely, and I understand that, and I think that's a good thing on occasion. I think there's many more negatives to that because again, the locals are not earning the revenue. There's no eyes on the ground there looking for poachers. I mean, whether we like it or not, our guides out in the field are preventing poachers from coming through and such. And right now that's not happening. We are supporting a lot of the people who are on the ground front lines, conservation officers and rangers and such. So some of our money is going to those folks as well. So there are some wins, but the big win that I see every day is all of us are really looking at life a little differently. The highlight of my day is the 1 hour I get to go outside. You know, I mean, there's a lot of work to do, but I scheduled the 1 hour to go outside, and I really feel people are appreciating being outside more, understanding how important nature is. I think that we're learning how little we can live with. I mean, how much have I been in my car in the last 2 months? Barely at all. There was a 10-day period I wasn't in it, and I'm like, this is great. I just use my bike. So, you know, for people at Nat Hab, we're really realizing we can do with a lot less. And I think that's the big win here is that I think people can be a lot more sustainable. They can do with a lot less and consume less, and life can be a little simpler. That's the biggest win. You know, we've always felt that at Nat Hab. We've always used 100% post-consumer waste, recycled paper. We try to do most of our stuff via email, or most of our marketing via email, though we do some printing. We've tried to minimize things. We gave all of our entire company e-bikes last year for the holidays, which was wonderful. And the amount that we ride to work is fantastic. Lee, do you have a video on that? I thought that would be maybe interesting for people to see, a couple-minute video on e-bikes, but it's just an example of what we can get to that I think we're learning from this.
When Nat Hab first started, it was about taking people out into nature to see amazing wildlife. Some time ago, we realized we had a responsibility to the environments that we take people out to see. And so we started challenging ourselves to be more and more sustainable.
We really wanted to offset our office carbon emissions. Ben came up with some creative ideas. Maybe creative's the wrong word.
Back in the late 90s, before recycled fibers were really a thing, Ben had the idea to make all of our gear out of recyclables.
Shirts and we,
It's
yeah,
got tube socks. It's got tube socks.
Showcase
Tube
of
socks
recycled
for
shirts.
straps.
Tell me what's wrong with
How
that.
is tube socks for straps? Progress? What do you think?
That is
Ben also had the idea to go vegetarian and encouraged the whole office to as well.
Come on. Most recently, we decided to focus on transportation. That too had its challenges. Imagine if people didn't have to drive to work. These things would go pretty fast.
Well, I'm with you on the concept of people not driving to work. I'm just not sure this is the best option.
Anyways, to make a long story short, we settled on getting electric bikes for each of our staff as a holiday gift. They're practical, they've got long range, they're safe. Safety's key.
Oh. Are you serious? Holy. Oh my god.
Oh my god. Like, oh my god, here's the bike, here's the bike.
Oh, there's no way.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
It's pretty unbelievable.
Speechless, actually.
Imagine if more companies did things like this. Big companies. Legally, I can't name names, but companies that rhyme with Google or Tamazon or Schmezla. If companies like these got on board, we could make a big impact.
Ben can be pretty out there with his ideas, but when he gets one right, he can really pull it off.
Love that video. Love it. We have fun. We have fun in the office. Fantastic. Ben, did you want to say anything? I don't mean to cut you off.
Well, I forgot to tell you guys, it was a little bit of a comedy video, but
It's kind of like a parody based on The Office, sort of.
Yeah.
We have plans of another one in the works. Fun stuff. Yeah, just, before we showed the video, I was just going to underline Ben's point is that, while recycling and composting and things like that are fantastic, I think the way we're rewrapping our brains around consumption is, I do a lot of talks on sustainability, and really the best thing, most sustainable thing is to try to dial back consumption and to not use it, to refuse it, or to reuse things. So I think I hope that that's a mindset that we embrace anew after all this as well. And then before I move on to the next question, one other neat little positive I've personally seen, Ben, remember that time when I started a rumor about dolphins coming back to Italy?
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, I think that, there are a lot of examples out there that are showing that nature is maybe a bit more resilient than we thought originally. Now, I am an ardent conservationist, but I've long done tropical research in the neotropics and the tropics of Africa and Asia, and we've always known that a tropical forest can actually regenerate itself in the matter of a couple hundred years. And I think it's extremely encouraging to see within weeks or months of change of just things coming back to areas that in more the concrete jungles of our world, the not the ecotourism places, but our cities and metropolitan areas, how things can rebound quickly, and that gives me a little bit of pep in my step. I gotta say, it's encouraging to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. But okay, so on to another question. This is I kind of want to get into the meat and potatoes of things here. Talking about how the pandemic is affecting travel. One of the questions we have, which I think is a great one, is how will the travel industry have changed once it reopens? We know travel will reopen at some point. How will the industry in general have changed? And maybe say a few words about maybe the change that Nat Hab will see as well.
Sure. Again, a great question. How will the industry change? For one, the adventure travel industry and the travel industry in general is probably the most fragmented industry in the world. I mean, except for maybe restaurants and so on. There's just tons and tons of companies everywhere from two guys that have a canoe in the boundary waters all the way to larger, an expedition cruise company like Lindblad Expeditions, and then to the large, more mainstream bus tour companies. So there's a lot of companies out there. The companies that this is my guess. Listen, you can't have a crystal ball, but my guess is the companies that haven't been careful with their money are going to be in trouble. When I say trouble, maybe they're not going to be able to bounce back as quickly. Maybe they will get consolidated, 2 or 3 companies merging, or it could be that some of the big companies out of like Germany, there's a company that acquires a bunch of companies, and maybe that could happen. That's a bit of a shame if you get acquired by a roll-up like that, where there's a lot of companies, like dozens of companies, because you lose your soul. Those companies tend to lose what it is that made them great in the first place. So the companies, I think, that have not been careful with their money are going to find themselves having to make some very big decisions about what they're going to do. Some of them aren't going to make it. There's no question about that. As far as Nat Hab, we save all of our profits every year. I mean, it's been fantastic. My partners are wonderful about that, and they agree that we need to have a war chest for tough times. Listen, you can't go out of business if you have money in the bank, and we're a company that has believed this for years, and so we've just left money in the bank, and so we're in a fantastic position in that regard. Obviously, nobody's in a fantastic position, but comparatively, we're going to be fine coming out of this. And when it is time, we're going to be able to ramp up pretty immediately because we've been very conservative. We've done some really cool, fun things, like we, spent $1.5 million to build a safari camp on the Arctic Circle in Greenland. But you can do that if you've got a full war chest that's multiple times larger than that, sitting there waiting for these rainy days. Now, nobody expected the rainy day that to be to the extent that this is. Even me being very conservative and saying we have to be careful to not grow too fast so that we don't find ourselves in trouble if something bad happens. I couldn't have imagined this. Nobody could have imagined this. You know, it'll be really even more important for the conservative companies, the companies who have been careful, will be in a better situation. So I do think you're going to see a different landscape when this comes out, where there's fewer companies, whether they're consolidated or a few of them go out of business. That's really what I see as the picture. On the ground, what you're going to see is you've got hundreds and hundreds of safari camps in Africa, for example. Many of those will either temporarily go out of business or fully go out of business or combine efforts. The companies that have 2 or 3 or 4 camps tend to do a little better than one single camp. And that's a shame, because that's the front line of conservation. That one camp in this one area employs 30 people that may support, you know, several hundred in villages. If that camp goes out of business, there is no revenue for those people. There's no motivation for them to protect their local habitat and the wildlife that resides within it. And that's where there's going to be problems. We've been talking to a lot of our suppliers in Africa about how we can support those camps. You have to be careful. You can't just send money everywhere, because you need to be conservative, but you want to make sure they have enough to shutter their doors for a little while, support people, and then come back. Because if they're gone, that conservation element is gone.
Excellent. So I told you before this webinar, I was looking up, you know, some tips on how to be a great moderator, and one of the tips was to ask the question, why is that? So Ben, why is that? No, I'm kidding. But no, actually, as we're talking about the travel industry, I want to kind of switch from the pandemic thing and talk a little bit more about Nat Hab. You know, this question came to us, and it talks maybe a little bit more about kind of like the differentiators that we have. I know that, you know, as an expedition leader, we have the best expedition leaders in the business, that's for sure. The question coming in is, how do you find and vet the best local partners and guides for your trips? How do you find and vet the best local partners and guides for your trips?
That's a fun question. I mean, that's been probably the most fun part of this business for so many years. I mean, in a short answer, the short answer for me is beer. You know, you become friends with these people. You go out and you spend time with them. I always believe that having a deep partnership with one local supplier, one local camp owner, with guides and such, having a deep partnership with them versus a lot of sort of cursory, superficial partnerships is the way to go, because they want to take care of you. They want to take care of your guests. If you think of yourself as teammates on a soccer team or whatever, you want to help your teammate. You want to cover for them. If something goes wrong, which happens all the time in adventure travel, this is what happens. That's why it's adventure travel. So these partnerships are even more important there. So it's basically just like how friendships works. You have one expedition leader, our first expedition leader, Steve Morello, friendliest guy in the world, you know, and he meets somebody and he introduces, and we meet, we talk, and we really see if our ethos align, and then we, you know, become partners, and we have another expedition leader, and you're friends of friends, and you just like friendships, you just find out if your ideals align, and if they do, then you're going to work well together. You know, of course, there are some that don't work, but generally speaking, it's about just sharing the same goals and the same mission, and if you do.
Yep, agreed. That reminds me, you know, so when I'm working with expedition leaders as well, and I'm doing some training on sustainability and various things, guide training, I always come back to this concept of getting into someone's why. When you understand someone's why, I think we do a great job in understanding their why for conservation, their why for saving the wild world through responsible ecotourism. And if you haven't, a shout out to a great book out there called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. I think that really gets to the bottom of how you can find great people in great parts of the world. So then the other thing that comes to mind, and I'm sorry I won't do too much talking here, but is, you know, is the trust aspect, and you hit the nail on the head exactly, Ben, is the trust behind this. You know, I think oftentimes we take for granted the true adventurous nature of some of these far-flung expeditions, and even though we're making it easy on folks, you know, to get to these far places, I mean, it's still an expedition. And I think when you start with that trust and that camaraderie and that experience, it really blossoms from there. So yeah, a lot about trust as well. So I heard you mention something a little bit here. I'm going to pick up on this question. If you weren't involved in the travel business, this is kind of a fun one. If you weren't involved in the travel business, what would you be doing? This is just a get to know Ben kind of question. What would you be doing?
Well, since Manchester United isn't looking for any 57-year-old strikers who don't have any skill, I probably have to choose something else. And I guess center field for the Yankees is probably out too, right? I think I would, it's funny, my son asked me this question just the other day, but I think I'd like to be a writer, I'm tortured, I'm a tortured fella, I could sit there and write for a while, and but I really do enjoy that part. I love writing our e-newsletters, for example, and while I'm not always so great at it, and our writers have to clean it all up, I really enjoy that part. It does, it's similar to what we do. It's about telling stories, because travel's about telling stories. We know that going and sitting next to a mountain gorilla is such an incredible experience, but it becomes an ongoing experience, because you will, for the rest of your life, be able to go to a cocktail party and tell somebody about that. And people want to talk about that, and they want to hear about that, and then they want to share their own stories. So writing to me is similar to the stories that we get in travel.
Love it. I wouldn't have, that's a great answer. I wouldn't have predicted that one though. I like it. A travel writer.
Stand-up comedians have, so.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Gotta be funny.
Okay, so we're getting to the last couple questions here, and I saved these here. What is your proudest accomplishment when it comes to your organization? What are you proudest about with Nat Hab?
God, I've seen a lot, and well over 35 years, but in the last 3 months, I have to say, the conservation element is been something that is so close to my heart, and I'm very proud of. But that's part of the people. The thing that I'm proudest of is to see our staff. We've got a group of people here in Boulder, and some of them that work remotely, that are just right now, for example, working 18-hour days, weekends, and just to fix this mess, and to see these people, and that I've been able to give them a job, and they've created it and taken it so much further than I could have imagined. And then they hold me to a standard. Sustainability, it's easy to forget. It's easy to buy something in styrofoam. It's easy to throw things away, and then I have you and others in the company going, we got to do this, and so we all challenge each other to be better and better. So to me, be able to provide an opportunity for folks like yourself and others who then run with it, and make it great and for it to be focused on something that I'm very passionate about is what makes me the proudest.
Fantastic, good answer. All right, we're drawing to, I think, the final question here, which I like one of the best, is in all of your travels, Ben, what experience surprised you more than any other? In all of your travels.
Boy. What does surprise me regularly is how wild some places are that you don't anticipate they'll be that wild. I'll give you an example. And this is probably the biggest example I've had. I was up in the Shetland Islands, northernmost Scotland, a number of years ago, and I'd been to bush villages in Botswana and just crazy places that don't see many Westerners. And you get up to the Shetland Islands, and it is the weirdest, wildest place. You would just think it's Scotland. How crazy can it be? How out there? But the natural history of the place is incredible, with hundreds of thousands of puffins and skuas and cliffs and incredible old Viking settlements and so on. But there's very few people there, and you get there, and there's old scary people in stone houses, just out of hundreds of years ago, and it's just a very historic place where they, you would think it's Scotland, they're used to visitors, and they're maybe, you know, they've got a bar that's in a trailer home, and then they've got an old stone house with seals in it. So seals come live in a house. And it's just the weirdest, craziest place. We got attacked by polar skuas on a hike. They come from, they call them bonks. They're supposed to come and attack your head. And I expected to see some cool little villages and get out of there. But we spent days there exploring, and it was the wildest place I've ever been to, except for maybe Greenland. So that's probably the most surprising place. But if we have another couple of hours, I could get through some of the crazy stories that have happened in places that are where I anticipated crazy stories to happen.
I can only imagine. Well, we should do this again sometime. Yeah, you know, just to underline again what you're saying, I think I've been doing some media interviews like on email, just sustainability and some things lately, and I think, you know, one of the things that I'm saying is that I think when we come out of this, we're going to realize how much we took for granted the quest for new experiences and the satisfaction we get from those pleasant surprises that travel can deliver like nothing else.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think the important part of that is that these wild nature experiences, yes, they're in Africa and they're in Asia, and they're the places we expect them to be. And you go to Patagonia and it's incredible and it's so vast, but they're everywhere too. I mean, if you live in Westchester, New York, get out there on some of those trails. You'll be amazed of how beautiful it is, particularly in the fall. And so nature is everywhere, and that's some of the surprising things that I think we find is that you don't have to go that far to really experience what nature's about.
It's a beautiful world out there.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, that was my final question. Ben, I'll let you say maybe a couple closing things, but before we do go, I just want to say thank you to everyone on the line out there today. I think that, you know, we accomplished our goal here of getting unique insight into the travel industry and into the man that is Ben Bressler, truly one of the pioneers of ecotourism and conservation travel. You know, he's very, very humble about that, but that's a real deal thing. When I was studying in grad school, you know, I was getting masters and whatnot in ecotourism and PhD in entomology and whatnot. Natural Habitat was it was a case study. You know, these are the companies out there, and Ben he's a pioneer. So anyway, it's a privilege. It's great to hear from you, and I think it's really another great goal to get together as a community. You know, our travelers that I know are out there on the line, people that have not yet been with us. You know, we're creating community here, which I think we need more than ever, and we find that travel is such an integral part in creating that. So we can do so right now virtually, and it's been a pleasure being with everyone in our little community today. And I'll hand it over to Ben for any last words.
Well, I just want to thank you folks so much. Thank you, Court, for moderating this and going through these questions. But thank you folks so much, not only for attending today, but the participation on our Daily Dose of Nature has been wonderful. I know they've been really helpful for folks who have been isolated, like my mother-in-law, my sweet mother-in-law, Ursula. I want to say hi if you're on. And so many folks have been able to at least spend an hour learning about some great places. And so I thank all of the presenters, but I thank you guests and visitors for participating. You guys keep us motivated. So thank you very much. Okay.
All right. Well, Court, anything else?
No, we'll end there. Thank you, Lee, for helping host this as well. And I'll be back on the screen here in just a few short days talking more about photography and some traditional things. But yeah, I hope to make this a tradition. It's fun to have a chat like this and give you guys a little bit of insight into what we do around here.
Yeah, and lots of great comments about how uplifting today was. So thanks to both of you. And with that, we will say good day and conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.
Fantastic.
Bye.